If you didn't already grab a book, make sure you get one from the counter. And you should be on page 115 with me, where it has the Roman numeral 7 at the top. So here we go. Back at Fort Sumter, the investigation was well underway. Stanton was determined to preserve the scene of the crime. He ordered the theater to be surrounded by a 24-hour guard. He wanted photographs of the interior of the theater to record exactly how it appeared at the moment of the assassination. Matthew Brady, who had photographed Lincoln many times, now photographed the scene of his murder. He captured the stage and its scenery as it was at the time of the assassination: the exterior of the president's box, the approach to the box, and the outer door leading to the vestibule. Easter Sunday, 1865, so this is 2 days after his assassination, would forever be known as Black Easter to those who lived through it. Abraham Lincoln's murder transformed a time of rejoicing in the capital to a time of mourning. Across the country, ministers stayed up late Saturday night and by candle or lamp wrote out the final words of sermons they began composing as soon as they heard the terrible news of the president's death. Go ahead to 116. In the early hours of Black Easter, Booth and Harold sought their salvation, not in a church, but at the door of a local Confederate. At the Cox house, Harold dismounted and knocked. Booth stayed on his horse under the cover of a tree in the yard. Cox poked his head out from a second-story window and asked, "Who's there?" Harold refused to give his name, not sure if he could trust the captain. He said only that he was with a man who needed help. Suspicious, Cox opened the door and looked over the worn-out, crazy-eyed man standing before him. The stranger seemed more like a boy than a man. The farmer looked around his yard. Booth dismounted with some difficulty and hobbled up to the porch to the door. In great pain, he pleaded with Cox for help. It was there, by brilliant moonlight, that Cox saw the initials J.W.B. tattooed on the hand of the injured stranger. It was there the sweet-talking actor used his charms and talents to win over the man to his cause. Cox swung open the door and invited the fugitives into his home. To the nation, Black Easter dawned as a day of great mourning. To John Wilkes Booth, it began as a day of salvation. Precisely what Booth told Cox on the front porch and during the next few hours they spent together in the house remains a mystery. The assassin of the president was in there injured, desperate, and on the run from a manhunt. Given the unusual things Cox and his son were about to do for Booth, top of 117, given Booth's state of mind, there is little doubt that Booth confessed all to his hosts. Father and son saw the murderer and his accomplice and decided to help them. Cox helped them decide on their next move. He told Booth there was only one man who could get them safely across the Potomac River. That man was Thomas Jones. They would summon Thomas Jones after sunrise the next morning. For now it was too dangerous for Booth and Harold to remain at Cox's farm. Instead, they would hide in a heavily wooded pine thicket some distance away. No one would search for them there, Cox reassured them, and it was unlikely any locals would happen to see them there. They were not to build a fire. Someone might see it. In the morning, someone would come to them. That person would signal with a specific 3-note whistle as he approached. They were to be aware anyone who did not make that sound. So that just means that they were supposed to be careful about anyone who didn't use that signal sound. The Booth and Harold ate the food Cox offered them, saddled up for the ride to the pine thicket, and rode off with Cox's overseer as their guide. If their luck held, they would cross into Virginia sometime after nightfall, within 24 hours, if, that is, they could survive just one more day in Maryland. Booth and Harold entered the pines, dismounted, and tied off their horses. Exhausted, the two men unrolled 118 blankets on the damp earth, laid down, and gazed up at the immense black sky decorated by countless points of twinkling light. It would be morning in a few hours. If Captain Cox's word was true, it was safe to doze off until then. The rising sun and chirping birds woke Booth and Harold early in the morning. Now they could do nothing but wait. Back at the farm, Captain Cox had to find out whether his friend would actually help Booth and Harold. He sent his son to fetch Thomas Jones right away. Thomas Jones was a Confederate Secret Service veteran who had spent his entire life trailblazing through the fields, thickets, and forests of rural Maryland and navigating its streams, marshes, and rivers. During the war, he had ferried hundreds of men and the occasional female spy across the Potomac River between Maryland and Virginia. He transported the Confederate mail between the two states and sent south fresh Union newspapers that provided information valuable to the Confederacy. Jones was a valuable and mysterious secret agent operating along the watery borders between Union and Confederate territory. The Union Army had never caught him in action. He was a river ghost to the boys in blue uniforms. His knowledge of the river enabled him to calculate the best time to begin a trip across. They should leave a little before sunset, when the reflection in the water of the high bluffs near Pope's Creek extended out into the Potomac until it nearly met the shadows cast, 119, by the Virginia woods. It would be difficult to spot a small rowboat floating in the river. Jones's service to the Confederacy had cost him a great deal. Suspected of disloyalty to the Union, federal forces arrested and jailed him for months at the old Capitol Prison in Washington. When Jones went to the Confederate capital, Richmond, at the beginning of April 1865, to collect the money owed by him by the Confederacy, he discovered that the Army had evacuated the city and he went unpaid. He lost $2,300 owed to him for 3 years of service, along with all the money he had invested in Confederate bonds at the beginning of the war. All this meant Jones needed as much money as he could lay his hands on. At Jones's farm, the Cox boy told Jones his father wished to see him at once. "Some strangers were at our house last night," the boy said. Jones's eyes lit up. Could he mean the heroes who assassinated President Lincoln? The report excited Jones. The day before, Jones learned from Union soldiers that Lincoln had been assassinated, and they had information that the assassins had traveled this way. Jones felt it in his bones. Captain Cox wanted to see him about something connected to the assassination. Jones saddled up and accompanied young Cox to his father's farm. Once he arrived, Captain Cox and Thomas Jones spoke casually for a few minutes until Cox could avoid the subject no longer. "Tom, I had visitors about 4 o'clock this morning." Page 120. Cox revealed, "They want to get across the river." He spoke in a whisper. "Have you heard that Lincoln was killed Friday night?" "Yes," Jones replied, telling Cox about what he had learned about the assassination from the Union soldiers. Cox finally blurted out, "Tom, we must get those men who were here this morning across the river." Then he told Jones everything about the late-night visit from Booth and Herold. Jones was no coward. 4 years of loyal, dangerous service to the Confederacy had proved that. But the war was over. Jones considered the situation. Then he made up his mind. "I will see what I can do," he said. "I must see these men. Where are they?" Captain Cox told Thomas Jones that Booth and Herold had spent the night in the pine thicket. Lincoln's killer was there now, waiting for someone to rescue him. Cox gave Jones the whistle code, a set of 3 notes, and cautioned him to approach the fugitives carefully. "They are fully armed and might shoot you through mistake," he warned. Alone, Jones rode toward his meeting with Lincoln's assassins. At the edge of the thicket, he stopped, whistled the 3 notes, and waited. David Herold rose from the brush and aimed his Spencer carbine, a gun, at him. The weapon was cocked and ready to fire. "Who are you, and what do you want?" demanded Herold. Jones told Herold that Cox had sent him and that he was a friend. So I have enough time in my video. I'm going to pause this video on page 121, and I'm going to finish it in the next video. So this will be coming up as part 2 of the rest of the chapter. And again, you're thinking about what parts showed you that it was from 150 years ago. How would the story have been different if it took place in the present as well? All right, so pause and then go to the next video for me.